I rent out my South Carolina house on Airbnb whenever I'm not using it. It's a modest 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house by the beach. 2 of the bedrooms are guest rooms accessible to renters. The master bedroom I keep locked, storing my clothes and certain belongings there. That room is for me, and I prefer to leave my stuff there instead of lugging it back and forth each time I visit. I have a regular lock and a deadbolt on the door, so no one can get in unless they break it down or go through the window. However, I don't keep anything super expensive there, mainly just clothing. This happened early last spring. It was still chilly up in Massachusetts, where I live most of the year, so I decided to drive down to my South Carolina house for the week. Since I work remotely, I can do this whenever I want. Usually, I have my cleaning lady come after each guest leaves, and the cost is included in the rental price on Airbnb. But since I was going down right after the current renter left, I planned to clean it myself and save the cleaning fee. The last renter was a guy named Ramon. Through our messages, he told me he was renting with his fiancée and asked for restaurant recommendations. He seemed trustworthy. I prefer renting to couples or small groups of women because they're usually more respectful and less likely to cause damage compared to groups of young men. I started my drive early in the morning. It was a 16-hour drive with only brief stops for food and bathroom breaks. By the time I got to the house, it was about 10 p.m. I unlocked and opened the front door, then went back to my car to get my bags. I was exhausted from the drive, so I didn't bother checking the house for any mess. I went straight to my bedroom, unlocked it, and collapsed into bed without even brushing my teeth. A 16-hour drive will absolutely wear you out. I crawled under the covers and fell asleep within minutes. You'd think I'd sleep through the night, but I woke up around 11:30 p.m. I'd only been asleep for about an hour. Something had woken me up. I grabbed my phone to check for any texts and then turned on the bedside lamp. I looked around the room and then went out to the living room. I started checking the house, but didn't notice anything out of place. I went to the guest bedrooms, and while the covers on one bed seemed to have been moved, there was no sign of anyone. I have a camera on the front porch, and I usually only check it if there's an issue. Out of curiosity, I opened the app and reviewed the movement history. It showed a man entering the house using the code lock 3 days earlier. He was alone, which was strange. I checked the footage multiple times, and there was no movement after that until I arrived. This gave me chills. I messaged Ramon on Airbnb to ask if he had checked out okay, even though it was late at night. I went back to the guest bedroom and started checking under the bed and in the closets, opening doors quickly like ripping off a band-aid. Every closet was empty. I moved to the second guest bedroom, where both twin beds were still neat and untouched. When I opened the last closet, it was also empty. I sat on one of the beds to review my conversation with Ramon. That's when I heard the master bedroom door click shut quietly, as if someone had closed it, not a draft. I went to the living room and looked at the master bedroom door. I called out,
"Ramon, are you still in here?"
with a shake in my voice. No response. I saw the light was still on through the bottom crack of the door. I got on all fours to look under the door and fell back when I saw 2 feet standing a couple of feet behind it. I went to the kitchen to grab a knife, but the biggest carving knife was already missing. My only option was to leave the house and call 911, which I did. I waited outside until the police arrived. When they entered, Ramon was sitting in the living room without a knife. He spoke with a Portuguese accent, claiming he just needed a place to stay for one more night, which I knew was a lie. He denied ever taking the knife, which was now back in the holder. After about 30 minutes of talking to the police, they let Ramon go and advised me to contact Airbnb to resolve the issue. I was shocked and felt the police didn't do their job. After they left, I changed the lock code and contacted Airbnb. Though I didn't get paid for the extra night Ramon stayed, Airbnb banned him from using the app again. It doesn't feel like proper justice, especially since he might have been waiting to harm me in my own house. I once booked an Airbnb by myself in an area in Arizona where I had a job interview. Since it was so far from home, I made a short trip out of it. I chose this specific Airbnb because it was much cheaper than any hotels I could find. It was about half an hour away from where I'd be interviewing, which was fine with me. It was off a secluded, dead-end road and had a nice view of the desert in the backyard. I brought my laptop to get work done for my current job during the day, which kept me busy most of the time. I stayed for 3 days. My interview was on the second day, which was a Tuesday, and I was leaving on Friday. On Monday night, before my interview, I was practicing interview questions and getting some last-minute knowledge about the company. I was doing this on my laptop in the living room of the little house, probably around 9 p.m., when I heard a tap at the window. It wasn't exactly a knock. It sounded more like someone's finger tapping the glass. My head immediately turned to look at the window, but I didn't see anyone. It was pitch black outside. I was scared to look out the window, but felt I had to. So I did. There was no one there, just darkness. Maybe it was a bug hitting the window. After all, we have some pretty nasty bugs here. The next day, I got through my interview and thought I did pretty well. For the rest of my trip, I explored different parts of the town in my car, ate at various restaurants, and relaxed in the backyard in the sun. Little did I know, I was likely being watched while I was in the backyard. That night, I was inside watching Breaking Bad on Netflix when it happened again. A single tap at the window. Now it was obvious it wasn't a bug. I was even more disturbed, but once again, I rushed to the window. Even though I saw no one, that didn't mean someone wasn't out there. I checked the windows by the front door, then opened the door and looked outside for a second. Since there was no one there, I went back inside and then to the back door. I stepped onto the back porch and looked out into the desert behind the house. It was silent and dark. Then I heard a click, like someone clicking their tongue. It was off in the distance, beyond the light from the house, out in the cold desert. I felt as though someone could be hiding behind any of those bushes, watching me and toying with me. I yelled out, and almost as if in response, there was another click. I pinpointed the direction it came from and saw someone standing not too far away, dressed in dark clothes and blending into the darkness. I started walking a little closer, but then stopped, realizing I didn't want to get any nearer to that person. I called out, "You're on private property. I'm going to call the cops if you don't leave," and saw the person eerily quickly walk away. I theorized it was the Airbnb owner, but that was a stretch, and I didn't really know what to think. The next night, I was in bed on my laptop, watching Breaking Bad again before going to sleep. I watched for about an hour and a half. I didn't hear any noises in the house, though I was definitely thinking about that encounter from earlier. When I finally turned off the light and tried to fall asleep, within 10 seconds, there was a click sound again, this time muffled from inside the closet. I looked at the closet door, which was open just a crack. Instinctively, I sprang out of bed, still in my PJs, and ran to the car. I sat in the driveway with the car running and called 911. I stared at the house as I spoke to the dispatcher, waiting to see if someone would come out because all my stuff was still in there. A police car arrived, and upon entering the house, we did a quick investigation together. It was very small, with not many places to hide. Despite finding nothing, I packed my stuff and left for a nearby hotel that night. I contacted both Airbnb and the host and was only able to get a partial refund for my stay. I still think it may have been the host of the Airbnb. I mean, who else would have access to the house? There were no signs of forced entry, which leads me to believe whoever it was may have had a key. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a stranger who snuck in at an opportune time. My wife Cheryl and I have been together for 10 years, and we got married 2 years ago. We just got a house together, not even a month ago, and things couldn't have started on a worse note. We moved to a small inland town in Georgia called Waycross. That's all the details I'm giving to avoid any more possible issues. We're on a quiet street with a big property that sits in front of a medium-sized patch of woods, which was one of the factors that really appealed to us. We plan to adopt a dog and raise kids here, so we wanted a big property for them to play on. We both work similar shifts. I get home around 5, and she gets home around 6 most of the time. The first 2 nights in the house went completely normal. It was the weekend, so we spent our entire days unpacking. It wasn't until Monday night, when we were both in bed, having turned out the lights maybe 20 minutes earlier, that we heard this blasting music coming from the backyard. Our nearest neighbors on either side are spaced out enough that we couldn't mistake music from their yards being in ours. It was definitely in our backyard, and it wasn't party music or anything like that. It sounded like very old, staticky, vintage music. The windows were shut, so after my wife and I exchanged horrified glances and wondered where the music could be coming from, I opened my window on my side of the bed, and it was much clearer. There was some song that sounded like it was from the 1940s blasting. I later found out, after looking up the lyrics, that the song was "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf" by Henry Hall. It has a slightly eerie vibe to it for some reason, even though it's meant to be a happy song. But at the time, hearing it coming from our backyard was nothing but downright horrifying. We were still learning the house, but we figured there must be a backyard light switch downstairs. I ran downstairs to the back door and flicked the light switches next to the door, and one of them turned on the backyard lights. I didn't see anyone in the backyard. I opened the door, and the music was louder, obviously, but as I walked out into the grass, I realized it wasn't coming from the backyard, but from the woods. The song played to completion as I stood outside, looking around. When the song ended, there was silence again. It seemed like someone must have been playing a stupid housewarming prank, but it wasn't appreciated. I went back to my wife and told her it was probably just some kids trying to scare the new ones in town. Hearing myself even say that, I realized how stupid and weird it sounded. Why would anyone do that? The next night, it happened again. A few minutes after we turned out the lights in the bedroom, music from outside started blasting, this time much louder. The song playing was Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Cheryl and I once again looked at each other, this time in genuine disgust and worry because we had hoped it was just going to be a one-time thing, but it was happening again. I looked out the window, and this time I could see something on the grass. It wasn't a person, but there was definitely something out there. I told my wife I was going to check it out. She said we should just call the cops, and I said, yeah, we will in a second. I went out there with the mindset that I needed to establish myself as the man of the house, not just to my wife, but to whoever was thinking they could mess with us, just for being the new people on the block. When I was in the yard, I saw the object in the grass was smaller than I had thought, but the blaring creepy song was coming from it. I realized it was an old radio. I turned it off and looked up at the window at my wife, who was watching. I held it up and yelled that someone left it there to scare us with the music. What she did next was not something I expected. She started screaming my name to run inside. She kept screaming, "Run!" I yelled, "Why?" And she screamed back, "There's people standing behind you." This statement made my heart skip a beat, and I turned around to face the woods. I saw 3 figures standing about 6 feet apart from each other, clearly facing my direction. They weren't running at me, they were just standing there. I yelled, "Oh, __," and ran back inside the house, slamming the door behind me. My wife was upstairs, hysterical and crying already. I told her I'd call the cops, and I did. They arrived, thankfully, not that long after. All the while, we were scared to hear knocks at one of the doors or windows. My wife and I desperately explained the situation to both of the police officers who arrived, and I showed them the radio on the ground. I asked them if they could take it back with them as evidence for prints, and told them I only touched the top part with the handle. They did take the radio. They also checked the front of the woods with their flashlights for a few minutes, probably just as a deterrent to the people in the woods to stop their behavior if they were still there. When the police left, honestly, we went right back to feeling vulnerable and scared. But thank Christ, the people never returned. This was only a few weeks ago, though. God forbid they come back. I'll try to get it on video.